This is Bucket Talk, a weekly podcast for people who work in the trades and construction that aren't just trying to survive, but have the ambition and desire to thrive. The opportunity in the trades and construction is absolutely ridiculous right now. So if you're hungry, it's time to eat. We discuss what it takes to rise from the bottom to the top with people who are well on their way and roll up their sleeves every single day.
All right, on this episode of Bucket Talk, we're here with Britney Friesen. Britney, welcome.
Hi.
Awesome. It's great to have you on the show. I know we've been trying to align times, and it's been back and forth. We're both busy, but finally hit on a date, and I'm super excited to have you. I love what you're doing in the automotive space, near and dear to my heart. So I want to get into, how you got into it. I see that you're racing, you're building engines, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff, but let's pull the curtain back and see what a day in the life of Britney is and how she got where she was.
Absolutely. I started with my dad, actually. I started racing when I was 16. I got my first driver's license, and I took my mom's 2010 Camaro out to the track and decided to give it a shot. Pretty much all of us kids did that just because racing has been in our blood since generations. So I immediately wanted to try it, ended up falling in love with it. And I remember I was at my grandpa's house one day, and he was like, "Hey, Brett, I got something for you in the garage." And so I went in there, and I just remember seeing this car, which is my current Camaro, and I was just like, "Oh, that thing's ugly. Please tell me that's not for me." And he was like, "Yeah, you can drive that. Like, I know you love drag racing. You can drive it." It actually was a family friend of ours, and he was trying to get rid of it. So my grandpa bought it, and then I drove it. It was down several times throughout the racing season. Missed out on a lot of great opportunities to practice racing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up buying it from him at the age of 19. And then I started building it myself with my dad in the shop. He was helping me a lot along the way. It was kind of like a come to Jesus moment when I realized I wasn't like everybody else and I had to do my own work because my dad was like, "You're not getting handed this." So I had to pay for it. I had to do it. So he just kind of like held my hand, talked me through it. I started recording it, and I blinked, and all of a sudden I'm here. I don't really know.
That's amazing. So is your dad a mechanic, machinist? Like what's his background?
He's actually an anesthetist is what he is, which is basically an anesthesiologist. He puts people to sleep surgery.
So he's actually really smart because he's a doctor.
He's extremely smart. But he actually learned from his dad. My mom learned from her dad, and they kind of ended up connecting through racing and all that. And then they had 3 kids, and all 3 of us are involved as well.
That's crazy. And are you guys brand loyal by any means? Like, are you Chevy, Ford? Like, what are you?
My grandpa on my dad's side, he is Chevy.
Mm-hmm.
My dad pretty much steers towards Chevy and GM. My mom's dad is all Ford, diehard Ford guy. And my mom actually grew up with a Camaro. So everybody in my mom and my dad are kind of more on the Chevy side, which I think is why I kind of fall to the Chevy side.
Right.
But I also have had a Mustang and an F-150, and now I have 2 Camaros and a Denali. So I kind of flip-flop a lot.
Yeah, and what's your actually so truck choice and race car choice, like what are some of the pros and cons of the Mustang versus the Camaro and the F-150 versus the Denali? Like what do you like about each and what do you hate about each?
I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for, price tag, interior, exterior, performance-wise. That's why I'm not brand loyal. I think it just really comes down to what you enjoy at the end of the day. That's why I don't get it why people get all mad when you choose the other one. Mustangs, I will say my 2013 Mustang, if you put it next to my mom's 2010 Camaro, they ran about the same performance-wise straight off the lot, and I had a V6.
Mm-hmm.
So mine was supposed to be a lot slower, and it wasn't. And but my mom's car, although it was running about the same speed as mine, it felt luxurious when you were in it. It felt like you were in a race car. Mine, on the other hand, didn't. I actually think that's my theory as to why the Mustang driver idea of how they can't drive. I actually think that's where that comes from, because when you're in a Mustang, it feels cheap. You don't realize the power you have behind it. Whereas in
Yeah.
a Camaro, it's nicer inside. You feel the power, things like that. So I think, again, really just comes down to what you like on the exterior. I'm big on exterior look. I don't want a
Yeah.
car that looks bad on the outside. Interior, obviously you get higher trim packages. That's why I ended up getting a Denali. It's nicer on the inside.
Totally.
And then performance, obviously.
Yeah, it was funny because when I was in still wrenching, my bread and butter was actually Ford vehicles. So anything Ford diesel, whatever. I worked on mainly Fords, even though I was a GM guy, because for me in my area, we didn't see a lot of GMs come in,
No.
which was kind of interesting. I don't know if it was just more people drove Fords or Fords broke down more often, but it was funny. I was a Ford mechanic who's GM loyal. But yeah, I mean, it's even funny because like even when my parents went through some like rough patches, they still were driving like Saturns and Buicks and like older GM cars, and it was funny. Like they never left the brand, which was kind of funny. So I kept it going. My wife kept it going, and yeah, I mean GM has its problems too, but both of us drive GM trucks now, and I absolutely love it. She's got a bigger truck than me. Um, yeah, it's pretty funny, but race car wise, so what would be your dream race car? Are you in it?
Honestly, I think my dream race car is what I have now.
Okay.
Besides like upgrading it, just because there's so many memories behind it. Like obviously, I hated the way it looked at first,
Yeah.
but there's just way too many memories with my dad with that car that will forever be my dream race car. Other than that, I have a few like builds that I would like to do. I can't say I'd necessarily like to race them, just because
Yeah.
they look very nice cosmetically. That's kind of the good thing about my race cars that I build. None of them are super nice cosmetically, so if anything were to happen to them, I'm not gonna be all butthurt about it. So
Yeah. So we see a lot of engine work.
yeah.
Actually, that's what brought me to your channel is you do a lot of engine
Oh
work
no,
and
you
it's clean.
paused.
Um, how often are you taking it down and rebuilding it, or are you segmenting it out? I mean, I would assume you've had that engine in and out multiple times on that car. So
So my stock engine, it was a Gen 2 LT1, and
yeah,
I actually just ran the giveaway on that one. It was the first engine I built, and I wanted to give somebody else that opportunity to learn on an engine that's pretty easy to build. So I just ran a giveaway on that, and so somebody's going to be gifted that. But then it had the Gen 5 LT1 in it, and the big thing with that was the direct injection. I
hmm
was very curious on the difference of DI versus port, and so I wanted to show that on the internet because a lot of people don't understand it.
hmm
And then ended up tearing that engine apart. It is now going into a third gen Camaro, and I am partnering with Skog and Dickey Parts Center for an L8T block.
okay, moving on up. That's awesome. Um, Sweet. So have you had any aspirations to go like race full time, or is what you're doing kind of smaller circuits and doing the stuff in your own backyard? Is that where you want to be, or do you want to take it to a professional? Like, I guess you're professional now. Would you take it even more professional?
Absolutely. If I got the opportunity to do that, that would be a dream of mine. A lot of the time, professional stuff like that doesn't just fall into your lap, though. You
Yeah,
got to have a lot of money.
a lot of
So
money.
although it might never happen, what I'm doing now is fantastic. I would love to do this for the rest of my life, just how it is. And if I ever got an opportunity to succeed above that, then absolutely I would take it.
Run me through an oh shit moment with one of your builds, or with choices in parts, or whatever. You got to have a story that you look back on and you're like, shit, I wish that went a lot better, or I wish I changed this. There's got to be that one thing that like kind of still haunts you to this day.
Absolutely. I mean, there's several. I mean, coming from somebody that's still building and learning as she goes, I do make a lot of mistakes. I guess, snap, there's quite a few. I guess the last one that was like catastrophic would have been race week this past week with my dad and my boyfriend. We ended up putting a TRZ anti roll bar on it. It was like an $800 anti roll bar. and I didn't check. I had somebody weld in the exhaust for me, and I didn't double check their work, and it ended up every time I'd hit a bump, the anti-roll bar would shove my exhaust up into my gas tank, and it ended up cracking my gas tank on race week. Which, if you know anything about race week, it's not easy to just swap parts out because
Yeah.
you're pretty much stranded.
Yep.
So we had to several times take apart the exhaust and drop some things out and like silicone it back in just to hold it together. And every time I made a pass, the pressure in the tank was able to hold so that it wouldn't leak down the track. But besides that, every time we stopped to somewhere, it would just start pouring out again. So
That's crazy. And then obviously you have to go home and deal with
yeah,
replacing the gas tank, and gas tanks sometimes aren't the easiest. Is that an easy gas tank to do, or
no, you have to drop the whole rear end to get it out.
those are a pain in the ass?
Yep.
Crazy. So whew, if you were to talk to somebody about starting their own channel and being passionate about what they do, I know a lot of people out there, actually my wife included, she wants to get more into social media and do a whole bunch of things. She owns a horse farm, and she finds, like, does tons of cool shit and wants to share it, but like doesn't know the first thing to do, doesn't know how to start. Um, what are some easy tips and tools that you would kind of tell somebody that's trying to hack their way into at least being seen from, a local level, whether it's, business advertisement to, getting into a network of people? Because, you see it now with the automotive industry or the maker community. Like, once you put yourself out there, a lot of people in that space gravitate towards you and then start helping you out with projects, or, hey, I'm looking for this piece of equipment. And then all of a sudden you start building a bigger network. Where would you say to start, and how would you start?
I would say my biggest thing that I had learned when I first started was to be genuine. You don't want to have a persona about yourself that's not
Hmm.
real. Because if I'm at the track somewhere and I'm not acting the same on camera, people aren't going to like that. Also, it's a lot easier to start content and keep content up if you're genuinely doing that every day. There's times that my content drops off, and that's because I'm not working on things. Like, I'm
Yeah.
genuinely not working on them. So it is hard to get content out sometimes. So I would say if it's something that somebody's passionate about and they're actually doing it every day, content becomes really easy to produce. And then obviously, like local stuff, definitely, like social media has all these options for hashtags and locations and all of that good stuff. So start doing that. Find the companies that you'd like to work with, maybe hashtag them or at them or anything like that. And it will, I call it almost fishing. If there's a company that I want to work for, I actually do that and I fish. And once that happens, sometimes they come to me. I've never asked for a sponsor. I don't like asking for sponsorships. So if I fish and they're like, oh, we like what she does, we want to work with her, then they'll come to me. And that makes me feel like I have done something that makes them say, hey, I want you.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also the mental hurdle. I'd love to talk a little bit about this too. Um, when you're putting yourself out there, obviously you got to make the conscious decision to put myself out there outside of my friend and family network. And then there's that, like, little bit of like, how do I think I'm a thought leader in the space? Like, what makes my content better than, say, I guess in our space, like the humble mechanic on YouTube, or some people who have been doing it for a very, very long time and are well respected, have certifications and schooling and whatever. And how did you conquer that by being able to, like, what made you make that decision to jump in and just start putting yourself out there?
Yeah, I think the big thing was in every time I like make a YouTube video, I was very clear saying, "Hey guys, this is like this is my first time." So like if I make a mistake, I'm going to let you know. So I wasn't trying to be the image of somebody that was a professional. I still don't. And I
Yeah.
honestly don't even like being called a mechanic because I'm not. I don't like working on OEM stuff. Like
Mm.
that's just how I am. And so I think that helped my mental battle on that because I didn't want anyone to think that I was a professional by any means.
Right.
And then I think after that, it's just the idea of wanting to be that person. So I started at 0 followers at 1.2, and now I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So I think it's just the idea, if someone were to start right now and they wanted to be exactly in the spot that I am right now, I would tell them to just start acting like you're already in that spot. Because
Yeah.
if you don't start acting like you're in that spot, you're never going to get there.
So I'll share a little bit about myself. So I happen to be doing, wheel bearings on the ground on a trailer at the farm here. So I was up on jack stands. I think you might have been able to see like one jack stand in the picture. There was a solo cup on the ground. A lot of people didn't realize that there wasn't alcohol in it. It was used so that I could put my bearings in there and not get their dust and dirt. And I got a lot of hate. Now it was great because I got a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
That being said, like, can't afford a lift, backyard mechanic, doesn't know what he's doing. Where's the jack stand? Like, honestly, like, I'm not used to it. Like, there's one thing when you have corrective criticism or, some of the welds that I put out in my early days, like, I knew they were shit. Like, I knew I was gonna, but like, how do you deal with the hate? Do you just completely ignore it? Is any of the hate like sometimes rooted in truth and you're like, oh shit, maybe I should have been wearing safety glasses and, how do you deal with that?
I can't say I'm probably the best person to ask because I definitely let it get to me. I definitely entertain it sometimes. I'm
Totally.
trying to learn how to ignore it.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, like, I just posted a TikTok yesterday about my truck, and there's a bunch of what I call internet mechanics, keyboard mechanics. They don't know what they're talking about, and they still enjoy telling you everything that you're doing wrong. And it does get irritating, but at the end of the day, maybe you just need to educate them.
Yeah.
And I heard something the other day, and it's so true. It's that our generation has an insecurity problem, and
Okay.
they project it so well, and that's why when I'm on the internet and I'm scrolling, just watching people from completely different niches, like I could be watching a girl that does purses and makeup. I click on her comment section. The first 3 comments are always negative, and they're
Yeah.
always the ones with the most amount of likes. And it's simply because our generation does have an insecurity problem and they project it like crazy. So at the end of the day, every time I see that, I'm just like, okay, what's wrong with you? Because you need to go look in a mirror. But
Yeah.
that's typically when I just hit the block button. I don't respond. I try not to entertain it when it gets to me. So
It's wild because like, I grew up in a world face to face, right? We grew up I grew up like pre cell phone. Cell phone was in and around like my high school era. Computers were just coming around. So like everything we did was real transactions. So for me, this idea of just being able to say what the fuck you want without having any repercussions. Now I'm not saying that like, talk shit, get hit, but on the flip side, like that
yeah,
was a real thing. Like if you wanted to speak your mind, there's a possibility that somebody was going to throw down with you. I can't get past. Now I know some of them are troll accounts, fake accounts, meme accounts, whatever you want to call them. But the boldness of some of these people to put out the comments that they do and from real accounts. I'm
yeah,
like, holy shit. Like, I would never, first off, I'd never say that, verbally, but then to write it down and then post it. And like, it's wild because I've gone through some of my own like bad comments and clicked on the profile and I have to see who this person is. So
hmm
I jump and I'm like, holy shit. Like, you got pictures with your kids and doing this and like real people. I'm like, holy shit, like you felt the need in like to speak to somebody you never knew and to say hate like that. I was floored. I was
yeah.
absolutely floored. I don't have the balls to do that. That's wild.
It's not that you don't have the balls; it's that you have the morals.
I
I always
guess.
tell my boyfriend I'll be reading something like that, and it's crazy because I can see a video and completely hate the person in it, say something nasty about him to my boyfriend, but never in my life would I ever think to one, say it to their face, or to two, click on the comment section and start typing. There's just a difference of people at the end of the day.
All right, so I got to get we'll focus a little away from that. I mean, it's one of those things that like you're heavily into social, and there are a lot of people out there that are just trying to do, whether it's the influencer thing, whether it's to get their product or voice or name out there, like it's the way of the world now. But
Yep.
back into the shop, do you follow a specific brand tool? Do you work with a specific um company? I know for me, I fell into the whole, I'm not shitting on Snap-on, but I fell into the whole Snap-on thing. I was buying tools left and right. I have a massive Snap-on toolbox. Like as I got older, I realized like, hey, maybe don't need to spend $700 on an Allen wrench set on the truck and finance it at 20%. Like
Yeah.
like where do you fall in tool selection and tool category?
Again, I am not brand loyal. I think people again take that stuff way too seriously. I have even the chrome socket on an impact thing. I don't get why there's so much hate against it. I have only broken a chrome socket on an impact one time, and it's because I dropped it out of an 80-foot lift, and it
Okay.
landed on the socket.
Yeah.
So I think people take some of that stuff a little too serious. I think it's a bit different when it comes down to a full-time mechanic and what I do.
Yeah.
What I do, I don't need the best tool out there, the strongest tool out there, the most warranty, because there's a good chance I'm not going to break it because I'm torquing to spec. I'm not taking off old parts anymore. Everything's new that I put on. So I'm not necessarily brand loyal. I did have a partnership with Michael Pro Tools, which is kind of just tools that I had gotten from them that I enjoyed using. And they always have like these weird, like they find very specific ways to niche down a tool, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
And then all of my impacts and drills and all that good stuff is Cobalt, and that's simply because Milwaukee you can't buy at Lowe's. You have to go to Home Depot, and I live in a small town. The closest Home Depot's an hour away.
Yeah.
So anything like that. So yeah, I chose Cobalt, and I've loved Cobalt since I've used it. A lot of people hate on it. I don't understand why. They always work for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of funny. It's funny that you said that, the Lowe's Home Depot thing. It was the same for me with tool trucks when I worked at a specific shop, but you know how tool trucks come and go. We had a Snap-on dealer and I was buying Snap-on, and then the Snap-on dealer for whatever reason decided he wasn't going to do it anymore. And then we didn't have a Snap-on dealer, then a Cornwell dealer came in, and I'm like, like this is not helpful. But to your point on the whole warranty thing, like I agree there's certain tools that you should buy based on warranty. Like they're high dollar, whatever. But like for me, having, my basic socket set be warranted, most likely, and this is terrible to say, but most likely I'm going to lose that socket before I ever need it warranted. So
same.
to spend, $30 on a, 3H drive short 6-point socket was kind of asinine at some point. And also to your point, I grew up early on where like impact socket walls were a lot thicker. So I
Mm-hmm.
ran chrome sockets on impacts because they were easier to get into tighter spots. And
Yeah,
yes, I've had a few split, but never shatter. And I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule. There's probably people that are going to comment in the section saying you're an idiot, but I mean it's doing what you can to get the job done
absolutely. I
as
think
safe as possible.
yeah. Also, it's like niche down too. Like I see a lot of hate comments on like home improvement guys that use Ryobi. Who cares? Like just
Yeah.
let them use what they use.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, well, and two, I mean, there's also cost associated with it. Like just
absolutely.
because, I've done this too. Like I've bought something that I've borrowed maybe 2 or 3 times, and I bought a cheaper version of it. And then knowing full well that like once that breaks, I'll make a bigger and better investment. But right now, it doesn't make sense for me to buy something that I use. Like I have this giant Pittsburgh um, pipe wrench that I use for like bending metal and stuff like that. It was like $30 at Harbor Freight, and I'm like, I'm not going out and buying like an industrial plumbing pipe wrench for like a couple
Yeah.
of times I use it. But like if you ever saw it in a video, it's like, oh, bought a cheap fucking pipe wrench, and you're like, come on,
Why does it
like
matter?
it doesn't matter. Gets the job done. So I
Yeah.
agree with you on the Ryobi thing. Like, you know, sometimes people just don't have the ability or are only using it here and there that, you know, it's not necessarily DIY or like weekend warriors, but it just may not be a tool that you use a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Awesome. So aspiration wise, is there anything that you want to like what's the next step for Brittany? Like where's the next level going? I know you're doing a ton in fitness. You have your own fitness channel. You obviously have the racing, you have the at-home builds and stuff like that. Like, is this the current trajectory is where you want to be, or is there like, you know, Brittany Automotive Incorporated big shop at some point and like doing crazy builds, or are you just content for right now?
I'm never content. I will never be content.
Mm.
But I will say that I was just talking to somebody about this because they've never heard of Britney Automotive. They just met Brittany Friesen, so they're kind of like trying to figure out like what is she all about? Like how's they don't understand like the process that I've done to get
Hmm.
to this point already. So they're trying to figure out, okay, well, like what's your big goal? What's like what got you here that you like where are you trying to go? And I couldn't answer it. I genuinely did not know. And I had said basically I started it without an end goal. I just knew I wanted to be that person that I was looking at on social media. And so that's why I've always been very genuine about everything, just because I just live my life. I know I want to be a mom one day. I know I want to drag race full time. Right now that pays the bills, absolutely. But if something were to come better, then of course I'm going to take it.
Right.
Like I was telling them I had a dream to have a Denali for a very long time. And I had bought the Denali finally, and that goal was met. But then I didn't realize there was about 10 goals ahead of that that were going to happen the day I bought the truck. Like I was going to get sponsorships. I didn't know that. I didn't process that fact. But that wasn't in my head as a goal because I didn't know it was obtainable.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things are goals that I don't know are obtainable until they start happening. And that's kind of like the sponsorships that hop on board that I didn't even know the company before I started working with them. But then I learned who they were, their mission, what kind of parts they have, and I enjoyed it. So I decided to hop on board. And that was a goal that I couldn't see before it happened. I will say, talking about the shop, we are going to be building 1,000 square foot shop in the backyard so that I can
Okay.
actually like always have my garage content. And then the Fortune Camaro hopefully will be done by June, July, somewhere in there. And then I will be building the third gen Camaro so it can race next year because I don't want to lose my garage content because that's where Brittany Automotive started.
Yeah.
But I also have people on my butt like, hey, why don't you race anymore? Like, where's your racing content? Because Brittany Automotive was never start on racing content, but
Yeah.
I do really love racing. So best
So
foot
that's kind
forward.
of funny. So you're just like, I mean, obviously you're riding a wave, and you know, hopefully that wave continues. But that being said, like staying, you know, open and optimistic to any
Absolutely.
opportunities, but then being grounded and being told like, hey, even though you move forward, one of the reasons why you're here is because we liked what Brittany Automotive started as. Now, not saying that like you're moving into a completely different direction, but it's funny that like, you know, you get pulled back and leveled and like, you know, I do want to see that engine content, or I do want to
Yeah.
see that drag racing content. So that's pretty cool. So trying to form it and meld it all together is cool. So congrats on the new shop. Is are you building it like and designing it yourself? Walk me through like some of the cool things there.
So no, it's gonna be somebody else is gonna build it. I don't trust myself to build a shop.
Yep.
Not really a carpenter, but no, we ended up. So we just got. Well, we're finishing up on a chicken coop because I just bought 10 chickens.
Yep.
For
Good
all the
luck with
chicken
that.
content came from. But no, we've had this house for almost a year now, if not a year. And there's just a big enough backyard for us to go ahead and throw some concrete down and start a shop. And
Hmm.
I've been renting a shop that's like 20 minutes away from here, but as great and as thankful as I am to have that, it's just not easy on my content. I grew up having my dad's shop in the backyard, so I could just walk out and make a TikTok really quick, and I could go lay back in bed, and people didn't know that I was laying in bed.
Yeah.
And then I could walk back out and I do a couple jobs and I get hungry, so I go make a snack and I go back out there. It's just easier when it's literally in your backyard.
Yeah, totally, totally, and obviously make your own hours. You know, it makes a lot, it makes things a lot easier.
Yep.
Um, Before we end, I do want to ask you. You brought up chickens, and why? So I own
Why?
a whole bunch of chickens, but like, why the mindset? More sustainable lifestyle. You know, want to deal. You like eggs? Like, what was the reason for the chickens?
So I have had a lot of food allergies and I get sick a lot. And I
Yep.
had a brand deal in Vegas a couple months ago and I got so sick while I was there and I had to power through for all the videos and everything, put a smile on my face, act like I wasn't feeling like complete dog trash.
Yep.
And I came home and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start trying to bake my own bread. And so I started doing that. And then I was like, you know what? Let's start making our own noodles. And then I had looked at my boyfriend. I was like, what if we had chickens? Like, are you okay with chickens? And he was like, of course I'm okay with chickens because he's very, I don't want to say anti-government, but anti-government. He does not trust them. So I was like, okay, so let's get our own chickens and then we can have our own eggs because he's all for the local farmers buying their
Yeah.
cows and buying their meat and all that good stuff. So chickens was just bread and butter for us, really.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that you say that because like I feel like that resonates at least with our generation. I'm seeing a lot more of my friends and family, um, and not so much politically or anything, but economically. There's a lot of processed foods out there. Again, you know, we're a pretty heavily laden allergy generation. I mean, peanut allergies came around when we were younger, and like, so now you're starting to see things that like kind of make you think a little bit like, is this, you know, the processed foods we've been eating or whatever? Not to dive down conspiracy theories because we could do this probably all day.
Oh, yeah.
But no, I mean, for myself and my wife, it was, we just processed our first cow. We grass fed, raised it. You know, there was some antibiotics because I think a lot of people don't realize that, like, you know, there's still the health care of that animal.
Yeah.
But that being said, like, I knew what we were doing. You know, knew what we were putting into it. Um, and you know, brought it to a clean and local slaughterhouse because I don't know how to slaughter at all. Um, you know, and then 2 weeks later, I had, you know, 600 pounds of meat that I shared with my family and myself. And I mean, it tastes better. Shocked the kids a little bit. They're like, this is, and they actually, that was a hard conversation, but they got over it. But
Yeah.
it was interesting for us because like I do want to be more self-sufficient, and I do think, like, to your boyfriend's point, like, you know, everything is digital, everything is electronic. The way of the world, there's tons of bad people out there. We've forgotten so many skills that
Hmm.
like our great grandparents knew. Like my great aunt Loretta used to, she had like a cold cellar full of, you know, apricots canned, peas canned, like everything was done and grown by herself. Never went to the grocery store. If she did, she went for like small pieces. But like, this is, I want to get back to that. Now I don't have the time to do all that, but I like where you're going with it. Are you going to take it to another level? Homestead a little bit?
It seems to be a trickling effect. The bread started and then the chickens came and then the
Mhm.
canning came and then the sprouting your own grains came and it's a rippling effect and I know it's just going to get worse.
It's, if you, yes, it gets worse because my wife just moved our turkeys out of the living room, um that are now too big to be in the living room, but they were under a heat lamp and now they're at the farm. But yeah, it yeah, it becomes a lifestyle, an addiction. I don't know. It's a labor of love. There's
Yeah,
some days I wonder if the actual egg costs me more than it would at a grocery store with
it does.
feed and stuff like that. But it's cool. Find different opportunities to like grow mealworms and, you know, have them outside free ranging and doing all that stuff and cut down on your feed costs, has kind of brought some of that down. But like when we first started, we were paying a lot in feed and grain and this and that. And I'm like, this is like a $20 egg.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They get more expensive when you have your own.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. You've been a hell of a partner, a hell of a friend to Brunt, and you know, I wanted to get on and explain your story. Well, have you explain your story. If there's anybody out there that wants to talk to you about any aspect of what we discussed, or you know, looking for help with certain things, whether it's a build or fitness or chickens, where can they find you?
You can find me at Britney Automotive on TikTok, Instagram, Britney Friesen on Facebook. Whatever you feel that you want to go check it out and message me, feel free.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.